For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Letshego Zulu discusses her book titled I Choose to Live, Life After Losing Gugu. So Letshego, you mentioned in the book that you wanted to write about losing Gugu, which is something that is not spoken about in your culture. Why was this important to you?
You know, I think Gugu and I were known as the adventure couple. We were known for breaking barriers, you know, doing things that people don't typically warm to. And in me choosing to write a book about, you know, losing Gugs and the many other topics in the book that are fairly known as taboo because people don't discuss them, it was just me being authentic to myself and doing what I continue to do, you know, breaking barriers and going where people don't like to go.
Can you tell us about the days leading up to your climbing of Mount Kilimanjaro, which you and Gugu had been planning together? Gugu did something that you've been asking him to do for months before you left. You were both excited.
Yeah, you know, we were both excited. Kilimanjaro had been on our bucket list for the longest of times, and I think we waited for a long time for a good reason, you know, to climb Kilimanjaro for. And when we heard about Trek for Mandela and the plight of the schoolgirl child who, you know, can go for days without going to school because of, you know, the lack of sanitary towels, we thought, well, if there are people that are climbing Kilimanjaro for that cause, then why not? So yeah, we were very excited, you know, to go and climb Kili for that cause. And yes, you know, as I recalled in the book, there were certain things that he did prior to us leaving for Kilimanjaro, which in hindsight, I sit back and I rewind and I think about those things, and it makes me realize that, you know, I think subconsciously some of us do know or have an idea when we are heading out, you know, and if we can sort out one or two things before we leave. Yeah, so I sit there with that comfort to say, you know, he did kind of tie up one or two things before we left. Yeah.
Yeah, but then your heart was broken. I also felt it while I was reading when he told you that he was not going to be in your group.
Yeah.
He was going to start with that early group, and you were going to be on the other group. It reminded you of when you were also like being shattered by your partner while you were on a comrades marathon.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So on the third day of the hike, actually, no, it was on the fourth morning, he decided to split up from my group, rather from our original group, because we were typically in the fitter group, you know, with the faster people. And when the night before, on the third night, he alluded to the fact that he wanted to walk with the slower group. You know, my heart was shattered because I felt that there was no need for him to pull away from our group, because Busiso Vilane, our tour leader, had informed us all to slow down our pace the following day, which was the fourth day. So I didn't understand why he wanted to walk with the other group. But you know, there's a lot of hindsight for me in our story, because then I look back and I think to myself, you know, perhaps he needed to walk with the other group so that I don't see him suffering on his way up.
And what went wrong, if you can just briefly share, what went wrong while he was climbing?
So, sure, what went wrong? Altitude is a big factor. It's a big player in what ultimately went wrong. Many people will know that as you are climbing up high mountains like Kilimanjaro, altitude sickness is it's a not that it's a no-brainer, but it's something that will attack, you know, the very few people. We all, I guess, present different symptoms as we are climbing up Kilimanjaro. Some people have terrible headaches, some people experience diarrhea, some people, you know, vomit. There's so many different side effects that altitude has. And you know, with Gugu, as he was climbing, on that fourth day, the day when I didn't walk with him, he experienced a lot of those symptoms. And, on top of it, he was exceptionally exhausted. And little did we know that his exhaustion is what ultimately led to, what essentially took his life in the end, because what he then did was he reported to the doctor that, he's absolutely exhausted and he needs something to jack up his energy. And, with that request, he was administered with a drip. And the other thing as well that happens at high altitude is that our bodies tend to absorb a lot of fluid. So already his body had absorbed fluid, and that, administering that drip essentially added to the fluid in his body. And unfortunately, it all kind of coagulated and, in his lungs, and filled up his lungs, and unfortunately, he passed away due to high altitude pulmonary edema, which is, the swelling up of his lungs due to the extra fluid that was introduced into his body.
When his condition deteriorated, I remember there's a passage where you're sharing that a Tanzanian guy came with an oxygen tank, they're trying to help in a way, but then the doctor said something that you said will remain with you for years to come. Do you feel that maybe she didn't do enough as a doctor at the time? Because that is how I felt.
Yeah, I told the story as is, and I kind of leave it up to the reader to come up to their own conclusions. But when it comes to the actions around, the doctor, what happened or what didn't happen, for me, 3 years down the line, I choose not to focus too much on what could have been done, what wasn't done, you know what I mean? The what ifs and because for me, that would have me going around in circles. I want to heal. I want to continue living life. And I choose, it's a choice that I've made. Just as I've chosen to live, the choice that I have made is that, things happened, things didn't happen. On the doctor's side, on the Kilimanjaro National Park side in terms of assistance. And, at the end of the day, we lost him. He's not going to return, and I leave it at that.
As you said earlier, you were known as a power couple, and it all started when he bought you a bicycle so that you would both enter the 94.7 cycle race. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I had been involved in sporting activities for years before Gugu and I met, and by the time we met, I was a runner, more focused on running, and he was more focused on cycling. And I credit him for introducing me to the sport that I have learned to love. It's now been a good, about 12, 13 years now of cycling, and I must say, back then, I would have never thought that I would be as far as I am, and I'd never thought that I would fall in love with the sport, and obviously time has told a different story.
It must have been hard to inform your family and friends, especially his parents, that he was gone. You didn't believe it yourself.
I think for me, the hardest part was firstly informing the parents. Which I partly did. I kind of handed the baton to somebody else to break the news to his parents, and of course they needed confirmation from me when I was still there. So they called me back when I passed the phone on to the next person for me to confirm. And then the other hardest part really was when we landed back home, and reality kind of struck, and I had to look at his parents in their face to kind of confirm that he really is gone. So that was really hard for me, because in a way I felt that it was a failed expedition. I failed them, I failed him, but I have ultimately decided that it was really not in my hands, and I can't accept the blame that I was placing on myself.
Yeah. After his funeral, you went back to Tanzania with his mom. I remember she even wanted to share the room that he slept in before. Can you briefly share some memories while you were back there?
So 2 months after Gugu passed away, his family expressed the need to go back to Tanzania, back to Kilimanjaro, and essentially see this place where they lost their son. And I went back with his mom, his sister, his aunt, and my mom. Unfortunately, his dad couldn't join us because he was gravely ill at the time. And, you know, for me at that time, it really was to allow his family to walk a certain path of, you know, his last days. I wouldn't necessarily call it closure, because it's not like we close a door. We don't close anything or leave anything behind. So it was just to tie up the loose ends and tie up the pieces for them, just so they know exactly, you know, the last place that he thoroughly enjoyed himself, the last place that he was alive.
And it was comforting to see that you've enjoyed a lot of support from your family, friends, and even South Africans at large.
Absolutely. You know, the constant love and support, it's never ending. You know, 3 years down the line, I still get strangers who stop me in shopping centers and they just want to give me a hug. It's the most heartwarming thing ever. I would have never expected this much love and support. You know, yes, from the family, it's kind of expected from family and friends, but from South Africans as a whole, I must say, I'm thoroughly touched. I continue to be touched on a daily basis.
But you also received that remarkable support from Chelsea, who lost her husband on Kilimanjaro 10 months before Gugu's passing. Can you tell us how she helped you?
So, you know, I have been lucky to have connected with a handful of women who also lost their husbands. You know, they all had different stories to share, but I'll highlight Chelsea's story because that in particular was the story that helped me to essentially get up and continue to live life. You know, Chelsea lost her husband Scott on Kilimanjaro as well, 9 months before Gugu passed away. And you know, when the news broke here in South Africa, it broke as far as the United States, and which is where Chelsea is based. And when she heard the news, she immediately reached out to one of our local newspapers and wrote a letter in there, which I obviously missed because I wasn't reading newspapers at the time, you know. But luckily, one of my friends, you know, had picked up that paper, and she reached out to the local paper, got the contact details of Chelsea, and in the end connected the two of us. And I must say, you know, linking up with her, bouncing off ideas, you know, she was my sounding board. You know, I asked her certain questions that were very intimate with regards to Kilimanjaro, with regards to, you know, going back home. How does it feel going back to an empty home? How does it feel getting into bed and expecting him to typically be lying next to you? You know, those intimate questions that, you know, no ordinary person who hasn't lost somebody that close to them would know. And more importantly, what helped me to get up and choose to continue living life was, you know, I guess one day I decided to go onto her social media pages and I just saw life. You know, I just saw life, and it gave me the hope that I too can get up and go and choose to live life.
It was also interesting to read that while some people would advise you to see a psychologist, visiting a medium worked well for you. Tell us about your experience, including your daughters.
So, you know, prior to Gugu passing away, I can't say I was ever open to the medium conversation. You know, nobody really walks around talking about such things. It's yet another taboo subject. You know, people don't really walk around sharing their experiences from seeing a medium because it's just, you know, people just have a barrier when it comes to that conversation. And when another lady who had also lost her husband, you know, shared her experience of how she connected with her husband, her late husband, I thought, well, you know, Gugu was, you know, swiped out of my life at the blink of an eye, and, you know, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye or you know, or speak to him. So I was very curious about the process, and I underwent it, and It has been truly fulfilling, and I can sit here today and tell you that it's part of the reason why I'm able to stand here, share my story with a smile on my face, and continue to live life because of that particular experience.
What would you say to someone who could be dealing with the loss of a loved one?
Well, you know, I always say to people, and for me, it's not rocket science. It's not anything that people don't know. We are all born individually, and we will all depart individually. None of us know when our exit will be. So I think our duty on earth really is to make the best of life. When our loved one exits this world, it's unfortunately, you know, the end of their life story. And I think as human beings, we need to understand that, you know, just as there is birth, there will be death. It's inevitable. And as much as we have hopes and dreams with our loved ones, those hopes and dreams are but, you know, figments of our imagination. And we can hold on to those, and, you know, until that last full stop is placed on your loved one's life and they have to exit. So I think as human beings, we need to be in touch with the impermanent nature of life, because it is essentially impermanent. You know, we don't know what is going to happen when. We don't know when our loved ones are going to exit. And, you know, if we sit there and we're in pain and we sit in this dark corner when our loved ones depart this world, we're preventing ourselves from living life. You know, I sit here today and I choose to celebrate the 15.5 years that I had with Gugu, instead of sitting and wallowing in sadness, and you know what I mean. So it's a mindset, you know, it's a mindset, and yeah, it's a choice that we make.
Yeah, I'm sure you have something to say, especially to your mom, because she was a rock while you were struggling.
No,
what would
absolutely.
you like to say to your mom?
No, my mom, you know, I thank her on a daily basis. You know, she has been the most incredible support. You know, even before Googs passed away, my mom has always just been by my side. And I continue to treasure her. You know, she's the reason why I'm the woman that I have become today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. And lastly, I'm sure South Africans would love to know what you are up to.
What am I up to? I am moving into the business world even further. Yes, I've been running pop-up gym, but you know, now I have moved into a different direction. I've been focused on health and fitness for many years, and very soon I am going to be running an outdoor media company. So I'm basically just working on improving myself and living this life and grabbing any and every opportunity out there. Yeah, I'm working on being a better version of myself.
That was Letshego speaking to Polity about her book titled I Choose to Live Life After Losing Gugu.